Hello, and thank you for joining us for this year's Summer Youth Work Experience Program 2026 OOD and Provider Training. My name is Sarah Trout, and I will be joined with the rest of my team for this presentation. So you will hear from myself, you will hear from Ronna Woods, Stacy Evans, Ginger Scaife, Jennifer Cosgrove, and our manager, Jay Burns. This year, we organized our training topics by frequently asked questions regarding summer youth work experience. These questions that will be answered include: what is summer youth work experience? How do vocational rehabilitation staff prepare for summer youth work experience? What can VR staff expect from providers? How does the referral process work? How do VR staff authorize and bill for summer youth work experience? What other services or resources are available? And now I will turn it over to Ronna Woods, who is going to kick us off with the definition of summer youth work experience.
Thanks, Sarah. The first question we'd like to address in this training is, what is summer youth work experience? To help us understand this question, we want to show you a brief video that our wonderful communications department created. This video was shared through an OD Works newsletter in October. Here, we have a picture collage that was shared in relation to the video, which has various pictures of students working. One student is working with dogs, one student is stocking shelves, and one student is smiling. Let's take a look at the video.
Students with disabilities receive a valuable first opportunity to step into the workforce through OOD's Summer Youth Work Experience. Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities empowers students with disabilities aged 14 through 21 to gain on-the-job skills, independence, and confidence through paid, supervised work experiences.
My name is Catherine Davis. I'm the manager of special education experiences and strategies at COSI, the Center of Science and Industry. Whether it's working with our data entry, helping with our research team, or supporting the building with the thousands of people that come through our doors every day, they're doing very important work.
My name is Chris, or Christopher. I am a participant of the Summer Youth Program. I'm part of the safety security team. I usually just check all the doors around COSI to make sure the doors what's supposed to be locked are locked. I feel like this job helped me a lot with my social skills and talking to random people.
Sayana Reed helps me learn new skills, and it'll help me later in the future to pick a job that I'm interested in.
My name is Oscar. I love this program so much. It makes me feel proud.
By the end, the students learn the essential skills needed to be successful in employment and are more clear in their career interests.
Heather Witt, and my title is Director of Employment Services. They're some of the hardest workers that we have here. Without them, we couldn't function because of how much and how they're willing to go beyond.
My name is Lydia McGrath. My favorite part of the job is taking care of the dogs, helping them out, feeding them like little treats.
Andy Goheen, employment support professional for ARC Industries. A big thing that they've worked on is just maintaining a positive attitude, kind of adaptability if there are new tasks that they weren't expecting.
And it's fun for them, right? Like, they're really happy to be here with us, and it keeps us in a good place.
Alex, I think I like dogs because they keep me calm.
I'm Katie Workman. My favorite part about this job is I think hanging out with the dogs, because some of them are really soft.
I'm Nick. I go to Hudson. It's definitely a learning opportunity. It's not the first time I've done this, but it's definitely shows me more of perspective of what the real world is.
Hi, I'm Jacob. I do the dishwashing here. Working means happiness to me. This job gives me independence.
OOD's Summer Youth Work Experience empowers students with disabilities, one summer, one job site, one future at a time.
Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities.
We hope that you found that video helpful, and we hope that VR staff and providers alike share this video with their participants. I'm now going to talk about summer youth work experience definition and levels. Here we have the VR fee schedule definitions for summer youth work experience. Summer youth work experiences are intended to be group-based services utilized to teach students and youth with disabilities, vocational skills, and appropriate work behaviors. So looking at level one is 10 to 12 hours per week. It may be structured between 2 and 5 consecutive weeks. No site changes are allowed at any point in the service. Level 2 is 18 to 20 hours per week and shall be 5 consecutive weeks. Maximum of 2 work sites during the 5-week period is allowed. Please remember, hours and weeks of service cannot be waived. If the referred individual cannot work the number of hours or weeks in the service definition for level 1 or level 2, whether due to disability-related needs or rescheduling or scheduling conflicts, VR staff should consider referring the individual for a different service. Again, please remember, hours and weeks of service for summer youth work experience level 1 and 2 cannot be waived. The next question we'll address is, how do VR staff prepare for summer youth work experience? Here we have 2 pictures of students working. One picture shows a female student running a photocopy machine, and the other picture shows a female student grooming a dog. When VR staff are determining what level to authorize, the disability-related need should be the primary concern. Consider the participants' focus, endurance, and stamina, any complex medical needs, and the availability of a personal care assistant or PCA if one is needed. A good question to ask is how these factors affect the number of hours a student is able to work per week. There might also be non-disability related factors to be considered, such as participant scheduling conflicts. This could be due to a vacation, summer school, or camp. Also keep in mind transportation needs, the maturity level, and past work experiences. This decision shouldn't be made solely on participants' grade level or age. For instance, you should not authorize all junior year participants for level 1 and all senior year participants for level 2. VR staff need to remember scheduling conflicts that may occur. Again, those family vacations, extracurricular activities, that could be a sports camp, band camp. If the student is not available, VR staff need to look at appropriate summer youth site levels because, as I mentioned in the previous slide, the summer youth work hours or required number of weeks cannot be waived. VR staff need to also remember transportation needs. Would one work site work better for a family if they're transporting the student? Some additional questions VR staff may want to consider include, is the student ready for summer youth work experience this year? Can the student commit to the entire program? Do they need to complete level 1 due to reduced availability? Do we need to consider a different service altogether due to these factors? VR staff, in communication with the participant and family, will decide which level is appropriate for the student based on past work experience, level of focus, anticipated level of endurance, disability related needs, and their availability. This is part of the informed choice process, as well as listening to the student's voice and family input. If the provider, after meeting with the participant, recommends a different level as more appropriate, the provider should reach out to the counselor to share that recommendation and any associated observations. The counselor may agree with the provider and switch the participant to the other level or decide to keep the original level. So for VR staff, please remember you have the ability to make that final decision regarding which level the student will participate in, but please remember those additional factors and questions I mentioned in the previous slide. We're next going to take a look about what you do before completing the referral. The informed choice process should utilize information gathered through the comprehensive assessment process, which would include information directly from the student, the family, documents gathered during planning, that could be the ISP or IEP, any known success strategies, including accommodations, and information from other team members, including school staff for other agency stakeholders, for example, the support administrator tied to the county board or SSA. VR staff should clearly discuss the commitment and importance of summer youth work experience to the participant and their family. Here are some examples you can refer to when making the decision on which level is more appropriate for an individual. First, taking a look at an example for level 1. Mason is a 10th grade student who has never worked before. He has limitations with receptive and expressive language and difficulty managing stress in job environments. He has a very limited attention span, and school personnel indicate he has very low stamina. Mason's mother has expressed concerns about him following safety protocols on a job site. The VR staff, the participant, and his team agree that he would benefit from a level 1 summer youth work experience. Now looking at an example for level 2. Jessica is in the 11th grade and attends a local career and technical school. She has difficulty concentrating and struggles with interpersonal skills. She has never had a formal job, but she has completed multiple volunteer experiences through the school. Jessica and her parents believe that she will be able to successfully complete 20 hours of work per week. Therefore, VR staff will refer her for a level 2 summer youth work experience. Next, we will address what can VR staff expect from providers. There are 2 photos listed of students working. One photo is of a male student wiping down a table, and the other is another male student dusting a science exhibit. Next, I will review how the 2 levels are implemented for summer youth work experience. Providers will determine the levels they can offer. This decision is a provider choice as they consider their own staffing needs, not a counselor or participant choice. The provider may choose to develop separate sites for level 1 and level 2, or the provider may allow participants with level 1 and level 2 authorizations to utilize the same site and job coach. The Summer Youth Site Collection tool will have a column to indicate which levels are available at each work site. Services must be approved in the Provider Management Program or PMP prior to sites being approved. So providers, please make sure that the PMP reflects the services you want to provide. If you want to provide level 1 services must be requested and approved in the PMP prior in order for the level 1 work sites to be approved in the Summer Youth Site Collection tool. Now I will turn it over to Jay, who will share more of what VR staff can expect from providers.
Thank you, Rana. This is Jay Burns, and I'm going to be discussing how providers select appropriate work sites. If you've ever painted a room or a wall, you may have noticed that a lot of the work begins before you actually put the paintbrush to the wall. Some people say that 70% of painting is preparation. Cleaning the walls, getting the brushes ready, taping off any windows or windowsills, and also making sure there's any plastic to protect any furniture or flooring. So in the same way that 70% of painting is preparation, so much of summer youth is in preparation before the students even get to the work site. So we know our providers are working hard to make sure summer youth is a great experience for the students. And so much of this begins by making sure they have the right work sites and employers ready for the students. Some things they might think about are selecting a work site that makes sure there's a set schedule with enough work available for the students that they expect to have present on site. Making sure the work tasks are identified ahead of time and we all know what tasks the students will be doing. Making sure the work site is safe and thinking about the safety of the students. And if there's anything they need to be safe in that work site, such as safety glasses or gloves, those are available and people know that those should be used. We also want to make sure that the work sites are realistic and viable. And we want to remember that the participants are not employees of the host site business, and host business should not rely on the work of the participants alone. Also think about site accessibility. We want to make sure all of our students are able to access the work sites and have a good experience there. Providers also should have backup sites or backup sites for outdoor work sites. So that includes landscaping, state park, in the event of any rainy days or extreme weather conditions. It's fairly common that a work site that takes place outside, like at a golf course, will have a rainy day. So if the providers want to be able to maximize the time of summer and be able to complete all of the hours that week, if there is a rainy day, for example, they could have other work activities arranged so that if there's rain, it's all already coordinated ahead of time that there's work site activities. So for example, you could be at a golf course and there's indoor activities such as helping organize a garage and doing maintenance indoors in the event of rain, even though the main work activities are generally scheduled to be outside. We also have to think about safety and extreme heat, which has been more common in recent summers. So please be aware and follow any heat advisories that may be occurring. There may be a need to move to cooler locations with shade. And we also have to consider adequate access to water for the students. Providers should also have backup tasks and/or sites in the event of unforeseen circumstances. Providers would have the option to prorate for the week if they cannot meet all of the hours for the week with services. But if they have a backup site, that's also an option, which helps give the students the full experience they were scheduled for, and also make sure the providers can invoice for the full rate of the service. The next topic is something we've always sort of expected and has been built into our expectations for the services, but we haven't had as much discussion in the trainings about this. So we do have a new icon on this training, and it's a dimension of selecting appropriate work sites. And this is some conversations we've had with providers recently in the last summer about situations where more than one provider is using the same work site for the same days. So this is something that we really caution against providers being at the work site at the same time. There are some confusions that could happen in terms of the employer knowing which provider to contact. It could potentially be confusing for the students to know who is their job coach and who is there to support them. We also want to make sure there's no confusion with CPI, with students from one work group working with another provider. And we also want to make sure we understand that if a parent has an idea of who their child is with during that service, we want to make sure they're with the person and the organization that they expect their child to be with. So some things to think about is that this year there will be a new attestation process. If you are a provider that is using a site with multiple providers, there's just some information we're going to ask for you up front. We're going to ask that, do you have enough work to keep the students busy? So if there's a lot of students at the same work site, we don't want to not have enough work for the students to really have a robust, great experience and to stay busy and be learning new things. So that's something we'll want some information about. We'll also want to make sure that this work site is large enough that students from various providers can be working in different areas of the store or work site location doing different work tasks. So it may be the case that there's two different providers at a work site, but they're in entirely different locations and they wouldn't interact. So maybe it's at a location like a hospital or hotel, and one provider stays on the first floor doing activities there, and then the other provider and group of students is on a totally different part of the building, maybe another floor. So that's the kind of information we'll be asking for. We'll also want to make sure that providers do not share confidential protected information about the students they're working with another provider that is also on site. We also wouldn't want the students from one provider to be left in the care of another provider that happens to be on site at the same time. We actually ask that you consider scheduling different dates or a different time of the day than the other provider. That way there won't be these kind of confusions or things to sort of work through. And this is all just part of preparing. So when you speak with the employer and the host site, that's a question that you can ask them. Is there another provider? Is there another summer youth work experience happening during the summer or during these dates? That way, we don't want our providers to be surprised either when they go out with the students and are at the work site. We don't want them to be surprised that there's another provider out there with another group of students. So having those conversations early helps everyone get the same information ahead of time. And then if you offer a site that another provider is also offering, you will be asked to share how you will meet these requirements above. So how your students will be working in different areas or performing different tasks or have a different work schedule. We will look forward to hearing that information from you. Some additional provider requirements. Provider staff must be trained to supervise youth as well as complete the reporting that's required. They must maintain a maximum ratio of 1 to 4. So that's one provider staff for every 4 participants. We know that there sometimes might be teachers around, there might be worksite employees, there may be personal care attendants, parents may occasionally be nearby. These individuals do not count toward that ratio. So the ratio is one provider staff for every 4 participants, regardless of if there are others involved, including worksite employees or personal care attendants. Provider staff must remain on site and supervise the participants for the entire duration of the service. So it's very important we do not have provider staff that leave the premise to go back to an office, to go to another part of town, to provide another service. Our counselors, our parents and guardians, and our agency expects that when we have students working in the community as part of the service, they have a provider staff that remains on site. And we do want to make sure that while they're on site, they're within eye shot or earshot of the students at all times, not in a different building, working on reports in the break room, not on the cell phone, not in the car, and not leaving the students alone to test independence. So those are some important requirements that, even though that's nothing new, we do want to sort of reinforce that and revisit that. Next, we're going to talk about the duty of care expectations. So this is something that's been a long-standing expectation, but this is new material for this training and a new term you'll be hearing more. Duty of care is a term for the legal responsibility of maintaining the health and well-being of others in areas where they rely on you. So certainly, when a parent or guardian places the trust of their child with a provider and with OD services, they're placing a lot of trust in us. And so part of that is the provider having a duty of care to do their best to keep the student safe while they're receiving the service. So that while the provider is delivering the service and they have the duty of care, we think this starts from the point of the provider either picking them up, if they're picking them up from their community and offering transportation, or when the service starts at the work site, if that's the first time they're engaging with the student. And that ends when the participant is either dropped off at home, if the participant is driving them and providing that transportation service, or when they're connected with the return transportation. So for example, the parent comes to pick them up, the bus picks them up. We want to make sure that that is sort of the window of the duty of care. And then this is in the services and standards guide. It's noted on page 37 that provider staff shall be physically present and or actively performing a service for time to be billable. And also on page 69, it notes that provider staff must remain on site and supervise the participants for the entire duration of the service. Provider staff must be available to the participants, not in a different building, working on reports in a break room or cell phone, etc. One thing to note about duty of care is that it is not transferable. So when OOD authorizes to a provider, that is really the expectation of OOD as well as the parent or guardian and the participant that they're under the care of that provider. So a provider cannot transfer that duty of care to another participant's personal care attendant, the host site employee, or another adult. This creates a conflict with duty of care as well as concerns about the protection of confidential personal information. So we want to think about legal liability. Providers have a legal responsibility to their participants, and providers have liability coverage for their participants. And then the parent and family expectations that we mentioned. Parents, guardians expect that the child is in the care of the provider at all times, as this is the definition of the service description. So we wouldn't want a parent or guardian surprised that the entity that they entrusted their child to actually gave that duty of care away to another individual or entity. Our recommendation is that providers have a morning check-in process to ensure that provider staff are present at site on time. Provider supervisory contact information is provided to employers at the host site, and there's a backup plan for job coach absences. Providers should expect time after the service to ensure students connect with transportation. So what we mean by this is we want to make sure there's not situations where students are left on the site without the provider. This has occasionally happened, and these are some things we recommend to make sure that doesn't happen. Some providers have really great processes in place to make sure that they're checking in with their job coaches and that they know their job coach has started that shift and is with the students. We wouldn't want students to start a shift and work a shift without the provider staff present. And certainly there should be a backup plan. So we know it's the real world and sometimes job coaches get sick or call off. A good backup plan might include supervisors that can cover, or at least certainly a communication chain so that if a service needs to be canceled for the day or rescheduled, we want to make sure the parents, families, and counselors are all aware of that. Next, we're going to talk about background checks for provider staff. While this isn't new, we thought this was worth revisiting. We do have what we commonly refer to as the provider rule, or Rule 3304-2-53, qualifications and standards for service providers and vendors. There is a link within the training to this code online. It is at https://codes.ohio.gov/ohio.administrative-code/rule-3304-2-53. You may be familiar that this provider rule sort of outlines how providers can get started with OD as approved providers, including their credentials that they have to maintain to be providers of services. And there's also some information about background check requirements for staff. So provider staff shall be at least 18 years of age and hold a high school diploma or high school equivalence diploma or the equivalent. So that's a baseline expectation for the provider staff working with all of our participants, which includes our summer youth participants as well. Providers shall perform background checks for provider staff, which shall include a check of the databases. So the provider rule does outline that there are some free databases that should be checked readily in the beginning to sort of screen out some offenses that would preclude them from being service provider staff for OOD. And then certainly there's also a background check. So even though we know that some providers have staff that work for them just for the summer, this background check requirement is still in place even if these are seasonal staff. We do have provider staff transporting participants, and they are subject to additional requirements, including documentation of insurance and a driver's record check. So all of those live in that provider rule that we've mentioned and is linked in this training. Next, we're going to discuss some illegal work tasks for our students during summer youth. These are all violations of the law. Participants may not handle or stock alcoholic beverages. By law, only employees of the business which hold a liquor license may do these work activities. Workers under the age of 18 may not operate a cardboard compactor or baler. So certainly, even in addition to being a legal issue, it's a safety issue. And even for the students that are legally able to do so, we want to make sure that's under close supervision of the provider job coach or staff. For a full list of prohibited occupations and work tasks for minors, we do have a website we're referring to here with the Department of Labor. There's a link here. It is at https://www.dol.gov/agencies/what-labor/what-jobs-r-off-limits. So These are all great resources for you to sort of double check the legality of the work tasks the students are performing. The next topic we're going to talk about is meal periods. This is an item that we mention each year because it's important that any student or any youth is certainly having the required meals they need during the day to keep refreshed, to keep refocused, and to keep fueled. And certainly while they're working in the community, many of which this might be the first time in their lives to work in the community, we want to make sure they're getting their appropriate breaks. So in addition to this being something that's important for billing accuracy and invoicing, first and foremost, it's about the students having a good experience where they have the appropriate rest and recovery and refueling. And that's something that we want them to have a great experience with their first experience with work and to understand this is part of work. So for the purpose of summer youth, a 30-minute meal period is required and must be documented when the individual works from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. So basically, if they're working over the hours of lunch or when someone would normally be expected to have dinner, that's what those shifts are designed around. And the 30-minute meal period should be excluded from the summer youth work experience hours billed and the vocational training stipend hours billed. So since they're not actually receiving the direct service, that is not part of the service hours for that service. And because they're not actually performing work, there's not a wage associated with that through the training stipend. It's really important as when you're planning these services to make sure that's reflected on the site tool that gets submitted. So please, when you're looking at those site tools and you're looking at your shifts and your hours and your work sites and the requirements, please double check that the meal period is built into it if it covers one of those shifts. It is pretty common that we have to send providers their work site back. It's probably our most common reason we reject work sites. And we know that providers do so much to get these work sites together, and they're excited about getting the information to the counselor. So we hate to have to send them back to the providers and cause delays. So anything you can do on your end to double check the timing and double check the meals will help make that more efficient on our side and be able to make us approve those quicker. And then certainly in the past, we did want to note that this has been an area where we've had to do cost recovery or corrective action plans when students weren't getting these meals or the mealtime was considered part of the service. So we did want to be honest about that and let you know that up front. So that's an important area. You might wonder why we cover this every year, but because it's so important, that's why we sort of cover that annually. Thanks so much for your attention to those items. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Cosgrove.
Thanks, Jay. Some more things for providers to take into consideration. Be mindful of the holidays when scheduling work sites. Note any work schedule differences on the site collection tool. So if weeks 1 and 2 are the same, but there is a holiday during week 3 and the schedule will be different, please note that on the site collection tool so that the participants have this information ahead of time. The weeks can be prorated or the hours can be made up during the same week. The work week is Sunday through Saturday. The state and federal holidays are Memorial Day, Monday, May 25th, Juneteenth, which is Friday, June 19th, and Independence Day, which is Saturday, July 4th, and Labor Day, which is Monday, September 7th. The Services and Standards Guide has outlined that summer youth work experience programming should begin after Memorial Day and would need to be finalized by Labor Day. Please keep this in mind if you are planning for multiple sessions. Transportation is an auxiliary service that is used in conjunction with summer youth work experience to pick up an individual and take them to and or from work. There are a variety of options available for the counselor, the participant, to consider as they are looking into these options. There is personal or family legal guardian who can provide that transportation. The Sometimes the providers themselves are able to provide transportation, and they will make that information available to the counselor so that they are aware of that. Authorization to private or public transportation service is also an option. We do now have ride-hailing services. OOD staff, please see the references on the AEU SharePoint page when you are considering this option. Please make sure to access that SharePoint link for all of the job aids and other useful resources so that you can understand how that ride-hailing services works. And then authorizations for travel training can also be made ahead of summer youth work experience so that the students are comfortable with doing the travel on their own prior to the summer youth work experience beginning. There are also fuel-only cards such as Speedway and mileage reimbursement when other options are not feasible. Please keep in mind that Uber and Lyft gift cards are not an option. The counselors may not directly authorize this to the participant and family, and they also may not use this as a pass-through option by asking a provider to get them. So these are not allowed because gift cards can be utilized for anything, not just the transportation. There's a variety of things that Uber and Lyft allow the people who purchase the gift cards to utilize. And so we just need to make sure that it's transportation only. If you would like to use the options that are available, and particularly if you are interested in considering the ride-hailing services, again, please use that AEU SharePoint link to find the resources available for that. Communication is key to a successful summer youth work experience. Providers, please take note that per the Services and Standards Guide, providers shall notify the VR staff or the VR contractor when a participant misses 2 days of service, no matter the length of the service authorized. The counselors need to be aware when there are issues with attendance so that they can have conversations with the participant and to know that in real time so that they have a chance to have those meaningful conversations when it will be most effective. Providers shall ensure that the VR counselor and participants are aware of site placement before the program begins. This should be communicated as early as possible so that the VR staff can make sure that transportation is available, background checks are completed, that they've had time to authorize for clothing if that is needed, if a particular uniform or type of shoe is needed, so that the student has that before they show up for work. And as well as other site requirements such as hospitals and nursing homes may require TB tests be completed. And we just want to make sure that the students have everything they need so that they are able to begin working the very first day of summer youth. Providers should keep open communication with the VR staff regarding site changes, schedule changes, and also ensure that they update the families in real time, especially if there's something such as a job coach was going to pick someone up and they're running late. The families and the students need to know that as soon as possible for safety. As noted in the training last year, in 2024, OOD orchestrated a summer youth focus group. Various areas of identified improvement included, for job coaches and service providers, we continue to emphasize that job coaches need to understand the participants' needs prior to their start on a job site. So there is less of a surprise and more understanding about the participant and their needs. Recommendations and best practices include discuss disability strengths, accommodations, and more at the intake. Prepare the job coach to be successful when working with the student before the services begin. The job coach should be aware of how each participant's needs are different. Instruction may need to be different for students based on their accommodation needs, their strengths, their interests. Job coach should not just be observing, but should be utilizing and documenting the interventions utilized. This includes modeling work, doing job task analysis to better explain what is needed, visual aids, timers, etc. Better communication with parents was another area identified. Some parents would like to have more feedback and communication about their child's performance throughout the experience, as their students are not always forthcoming and don't give details to their parents when they ask, how was their day? Recommendations and best practices include have designated touch points with parents or guardians, such as before the services begin, when there are any changes to the schedule or work site, as any issues arise with the student, and at the staffing. Parents have also requested that weekly touch points would be ideal so they really understand how their student is doing and have ideas of anything that they can do to help improve. Additional areas identified as needing improvement included job variety. Some parents shared that they would like to see more job options and variety within different roles of the team, and to ensure that there is enough work for the duration of the service. Recommendations identify work with a variety of job options, including enough work to occupy the participants throughout the duration of the services. Before returning to sites that previously did not have enough work, please engage the employer in discussing additional job tasks or consider alternate work sites. Some parents would have liked to see more challenge and opportunities for growth at the job site. Job site coordination and logistics. Some parents would like to see better planning at job sites so that the timing of services align with workflow of the businesses. Recommendations: providers should work with employers to align with the workflow of the business, identify the high demand periods when possible. For instance, for restaurants, there's a lot more work to be done during the lunch or dinner rush to keep the students occupied and engaged. And also develop a list of additional tasks that participants can perform during slower periods. Places like retail and restaurants typically have some very busy times, but then they have other times that are not very busy with the customers, and it is important to give the students different tasks to do so that they are not becoming bored and disinterested and perhaps finding other ways to occupy themselves. By having these additional activities identified, these additional work tasks identified before those slow times occur, this will help minimize the downtime of the students and help keep them more productive and less, and will help to reduce the issues and other challenges, for instance, related to behaviors. Here are some additional strategies for provider success. Providers must have a process in place for when the staff call off, so that participants are not left unsupervised at the work site. Participants should be given instructions not to begin work if the job coach has not arrived at the work site. Providers should add only confirmed sites and job tasks to the site collection tool. Providers should make sure that the tasks listed match the tasks that will be completed to the best of their knowledge. Students choose sites based on this information, so it's important that they be provided as much information as possible to make an informed choice. Provider direct staff need to be ready to address safety issues in a timely manner and contact their direct supervisor as soon as an issue arises. Some provider supervisors have chosen to have daily contact points or debriefs during summer youth to help with this. Provider direct staff should also maintain professional boundaries with participants. Interaction with participants should remain within the scope of services provided and defined in the Services and Standards Guide. Providers are required to have their own policy and procedure outlining appropriate professional boundaries and potential conflicts of interest. Please refer to the Safe and Sound training, the SURF instructions, and Services and Standards Guide. VR staff may reference the link for incident reporting and tracking policy, which is the 10 ADM 04 policy for more information. After summer youth work experience begins, then our VR staff has the opportunity to conduct site visits. VR staff are expected to conduct site visits in order to meet with their participants, observe their progress, and note the service delivery. Site visits should generally be unannounced. However, VR staff should remember that some advance notice may be required at places such as childcare facilities or hospitals. Provider staff shall provide the job coach's cell phone numbers and their supervisor's cell phone number to VR staff to assist with locating students at the work site, especially those work sites that are larger. VR staff should fill out summer youth observation form and return to PCMU no later than September 30, 2026. If there is an immediate concern with the provider or the site, please contact PCMU right away. That way we can contact the provider to discuss with them and try to make changes during the summer if possible. Staffings are another great way for VR and provider staff to monitor a student's progress. Items to consider include the flat rate weekly rate includes all meetings related to the summer youth work experience service, including a staffing at the end of the service. The best practice is to schedule the summer youth work experience staffing prior to or at the beginning of the summer youth work experience service. Staffings should generally be completed by September 30. The provider has the responsibility of coordinating the staffing with all associated parties as a part of this service. Keep in mind the end of summer all-in-one staffings are not permitted due to potential CPI violations and the need to have all associated parties present. The next question we will explore is, how does the referral process work? On this slide, we have a photo of a female student who is exercising dogs as part of her job. We also have a photo of a male student bagging groceries at Giant Eagle. And now I will pass it off to Sarah to give you more information about the referral process.
Thanks, Jennifer. A few years ago, we began using a new referral form titled the Summer Youth Referral to Community Rehabilitation Provider, or CRP form. This includes information such as summer youth work experience levels, group versus individual experience, site preferences, auxiliary services such as transportation, etc. So the Summer Youth Referral to CRP form has space to list the top 3 worksite preferences of the students. This assists VR staff in completing the referral, and it assists providers in easily finding the needed information. It also assists AE2s in finding the pertinent information as they enter the referral into the global site collection tool, which we will discuss a little later on in this presentation. This referral form asks providers to please notify the referring VR staff once the summer youth work experience site has been finalized before services begin. VR staff indicate the individual's top 3 choices. Providers try to accommodate site preferences of participants through the top worksite preference, but we know it's not always possible due to the volume of referrals received, travel and transportation that's included in the service, etc. So for VR staff, please make sure that you indicate specific session identifier information from the site collection tool to assist providers in correctly placing referrals. Some providers use very specific session identifiers to distinguish between similar sites. So using that correct session identifier will help reduce confusion with AEs and with providers and ensure your participant gets assigned to the correct site. So how does VR staff make a referral for summer youth work experience? When we create this referral form for the service, VR staff should provide essential information such as what are the students' strengths? Do they have any prior work history? Are there any behavioral concerns or medical needs, such as required medical treatments that may be needed during the work shift of summer youth work experience? Are there any PCA needs? Are there any required accommodations or known success strategies or interventions? And then please note transportation needs. There is a section called additional services requested, and that's where you can put information if you need the provider to offer that transportation. And if the individual has an ISP, an IEP, an ETR, or a 504 plan, or any other important documentation, you'll want to review those documents and include necessary information for the service provider. So this slide here is specific to providers and referrals. So providers should review the referrals they receive with all the relevant background information, including the section indicating precautions and contraindications, if known, for example, inappropriate behavior, medication routine. So they'll review all the information, discuss any concerns, any individual needs, or success strategies with the counselor or coordinator. Providers should also note any updated information that they receive from the participant during the intake that is updated from what the counselor had, and just make sure everyone has the most current information. Providers should also let VR staff know if any concerns were brought up during the intake that need to be discussed before service begins. Providers, please process intakes in the order that they come in, as they come in, as this ensures increased participant engagement and assists VR counselors with the planning process. So I know counselors can begin referring individuals as early as March. So if you get those, you don't want to wait till June to do the intake, because by that time, we'll have less of engagement and potential fallout. If a provider receives a referral for a participant that has complex needs, the provider should ensure they have the capability and capacity to accept the referral. So you may want to ask yourself, are there any outstanding questions? Do I need to contact the referring VR staff? Do I need to contact the participant or their support team to identify success strategies? You'll want to determine how you can meet that participant's needs. Does the work site meet the accessibility needs of that particular participant? Is there a place for a PCA to care for the needs of the participant, if that is something that is needed? And discuss the potential need for one-to-one services with VR staff. So if you receive a referral for a group experience and you feel like it might need to be a one-on-one due to the information given and gathered in the intake, please reach out to that referring VR staff to have that conversation. All right, and then this slide kicks off the conversation about holding a slot for summer youth work experience. Providers may have conversations with local OOD supervisors regarding expected service needs based on current caseloads. Please keep in mind that it would just be an estimate. We cannot guarantee a certain number of referrals. But there does need to be a consistent starting line for summer youth work experience referrals in order to prohibit informal holds between VR staff and providers. So just as with any other service that we provide, we ask providers to only accept, an authorization and referral for services as the go-ahead to begin with that particular service. So we ask the same of summer youth work experience because informal holds create situations where providers could be given a false sense of referrals, which it contradicts our overall authorization guidance, and it allows for line cutting and takes away from the equity of a consistent starting line. Providers could also end up holding slots for participants, either without the participant knowing that that site was earmarked for them and being in agreement with that, or potentially there can be a hold on more than one site as a participant decides, and that gives a false sense of sites either being available or not being available. So we really are trying to steer away from that type of practice. So again, please only accept a referral or an authorization in hand as a way to mark a slot. And on that note, we're going to talk about the site collection tool. So just as in previous years, providers will submit their summer youth site collection tools via email to pcmu@ood.ohio.gov. So some things to keep in mind before a provider may submit their site collection tool. Someone who is an approved contact in the Provider Management Program, or PMP, must complete the summer youth work experience and the safe and sound trainings in Ohio Learn and have that attestation. So when you go into Ohio Learn and complete that all the way through, the point where you hit the submit button, you should then receive an email saying you've completed the attestation process. And that is what we consider a complete attestation. That is probably the number one reason that site collection tools originally get sent back. So please make sure you've received that email confirmation before you submit your site collection tool. So this first submission of the site collection tool should have the most complete information regarding sites offered. Please make sure you have confirmed with the work site that their business is available and have sufficient work tasks for students this summer prior to including them on your site collection tool. It's a lot easier to add a site later on in the summer than to try to take one away after students have already chosen that as their site of preference. So please have those conversations with employer host sites ahead of time. And then last year, you may be familiar that we implemented a new resubmission process, which we will continue with this year. When providers have new sites to submit or they need to update already approved sites, they will send in a resubmission via email to PCMU. A detailed job aid will be sent out with the training materials this year, but kind of as a first taste of what you can expect for the resubmission process. The site collection tool that providers fill out, it has a column A, that indicates what changes are being requested. So for the resubmission, only lines with indicated changes will be reviewed. So if there's no indication that it is either add site, remove site, update site, or other with an explanation, then that site will not be looked at. So only those with an indication will be reviewed. And if you indicate other, we ask for an explanation to be sent in the email. And just go ahead and highlight those rows that have information that is updated. And we do ask that providers rename the attached file for each resubmission differently, including the current date. So if you were going to send in a new submission on May 1st, then you will name it Provider X Site Collection Tool 5.1.26. So please name it with the date so that we can differentiate the resubmissions. And if information is missing, the site collection tool will be sent back to the provider for clarification, and this will delay the processing. And on that note, please keep in mind that due to the high volume of submissions and resubmissions that happen during the summer youth work experience cycle, each request may take up to 3 to 5 business days to process. So again, that's another reason why I say it's easier to add a site once you have that information than to remove one, because during that 3 to 5 days, more students have the opportunity to keep picking that site that you want to take off. So please keep that in mind. All right, and so after a provider's individual site collection tool is approved by PCMU, the information is then uploaded to an OOD internal, what we call global site collection tool that VR staff may use to quickly access all provider sites, again, amongst all providers for summer youth work experience. The AE2s then update the available slots on the global site collection tool as the intake authorizations or referrals without an intake are issued and the official referrals are made. AE2s go in and they use that referral to mark the slot. So they would look at the referral, find out what that first preference is. If that first preference is still available on the site collection tool, they will mark off the referral for that individual there. If the first choice is already full, they will then move on to the second choice. And if the second choice is also full, then they will move on to the third choice within that provider to mark which slot they have been assigned to. AE2s also mark which office a referral is coming from, as well as enter the participant identification number, or PID, for each slot on the global site collection tool. Okay, and we have an announcement for something that is coming soon. We are looking at a new technology solution for tracking slots that may be available next summer. So please stay tuned as we're exploring new technology to make this process smoother. All right, so what holds that summer youth work experience slot? As we mentioned previously, an intake authorization from the VR staff holds the spot for the summer youth work experience. If an intake occurred within the last 12 months and a referral is sent without an intake, the VR staff should create an activity due to their AE2 to send the referral and update the global site collection tool. VR staff should not send emails directly to providers to hold a spot. That should all come through the AE2. This enforces a consistent starting line for summer youth work experience referrals. VR staff work to provide summer youth work experience referrals in a timely manner for planning services. If late referrals occur, providers can decide if they have the capacity to accept the referral. So we know that on the site collection tool, there is a space to indicate last date to accept referrals. So when it gets close to that deadline, we ask our staff to just double check with providers to make sure that the referral can still be accepted. So providers, please note that any changes with participant assignments should be communicated to the local office so that the global site collection tool can be updated. Do not email PCMU regarding participant site placement. And remember, the global site collection tool is more like a forecast than a real-time tracker. We know that providers do their best to get students into one of their top 3 preferred sites, but no guarantees can be made. So please make sure that you have open communication between providers and VR staff regarding sites and capacities, especially as sites start to fill up. And we have heard our providers say that one of the main pain points in the summer youth work experience referral process is that providers cannot see our internal global site collection tool. So to assist with that this year, this is new, AE2s will be sharing periodic updates of OOD's known student work assignments with providers to verify sites via email this year. So again, As the provider, when you get that updated information from the 8U2s, if you notice any discrepancies with placements, please reach out to the local office to make sure students are assigned to the correct place. And with that, I will turn it over to Ginger.
Thank you, Sarah. Let's talk about some important dates that you need to know. Starting January 30th is when providers may begin submitting work sites on the site collection tool. The completed site collection tool needs to be emailed to PCMU at pcmu@ood.ohio.gov. Starting February 13th, the approved site collection tool will be available to OOD staff for viewing to begin discussing with their students. On March 2nd and moving forward, OOD staff can issue referrals and authorizations for intake to providers. And finally, beginning April 1st, OOD staff may issue summer youth work experience authorizations to providers. How does vocational rehabilitation staff authorize and bill for summer youth work experience? In the next few slides, we'll be answering that question. On this slide are two pictures. The first picture is of a young lady looking at a laptop screen on a work site with an adult pointing at the screen giving her instruction. The second picture is a young man focused on washing dishes, presumably at a restaurant. Authorizing and billing for summer youth work experience. When we're talking about authorizations for summer youth work experience will be either at a level 1 or level 2, with both of these either being for an individual experience or in a group experience. If, for example, a student is approved by their vocational rehabilitation counselor to change levels during the service, the provider would then receive another authorization, as level 1 and level 2 must be on separate authorizations. Providers, please let your vocational rehabilitation counselor or staff know as soon as possible before the service begins if any situations arise that would cause the authorization to need to be amended by OOD. When it comes to billing, if there are students present at the site that are both level 1 and level 2, providers are paid based on the number of students at that specific level. For example, if you have 6 students working together at a site with their job coaches and 4 students are level 2 and 2 students are at level 1, then the 4 students in level 2 are billed at level 2 and the 2 students are billed at level 1 because they are in level 1 rather than any group total. Let's talk about transportation. Based on OOD recommendations, providers will typically receive 250 units of service for transportation for the entire summer youth work experience time period of 5 weeks. However, providers will bill for the actual units of service used. If OOD staff have questions about this, please see the Transportation Procedure 80-VR-11-11. If VR staff have a better idea of how much transportation units of service are needed, they can authorize for that amount, but it cannot exceed the standard 250 units of service for the entire summer youth work experience. And in no circumstances can it be more than 10 units of service, equivalent to 1 hour per trip for the student. Please be aware that vocational rehabilitation staff at OOD cannot waive this maximum amount, as no student is to be transported one way for more than 1 hour. Please also note that transportation is its own authorization, so if you are a provider offering that service, you will receive a separate authorization for summer youth work experience and another authorization for transportation. Slide 43 deals with the summer youth work experience invoice report forms. You can find this form on the OOD Provider Forms webpage. When completing this form, you're going to select either Summer Youth Work Experience Level 1 or Level 2. If prorating under 20 hours, say for example 15 hours for the week instead of the 20 hours due to a holiday, this would still be at a Level 2. Again, as discussed on slide 41, levels 1 and 2 cannot be in the same report. If needed and approved by an OOD counselor, you would put Level 1 and Level 2 on separate reports. Providers, when completing the report, please be sure to include detailed information about work tasks, the individual's work performance, and interventions used by job coaches while on the work site. The report also needs to include the next steps the provider would recommend for the students after the summer youth work experience has been completed. Finally, this year, the report now has a mandatory space where providers must put the date or dates the student will receive their paychecks. This will help alleviate the inquiries both counselors and providers receive as to when students are expected to receive their paychecks. There is also a field for the scheduled staffing date, which can be future dated. It is recommended providers reach out to counselors to get a staffing date on the books before the summer youth work experience begins, as this is an important part of the service to share how the student did and to plan for the next steps in the case. So, what are other services or resources that are available? On this slide, there are 3 pictures. The first is a trailer from Dress for Success. The second is students and staff meeting inside the OOD mobile unit. And the third is a picture of the outside of OOD's mobile unit. Provider open houses. On the site collection tool, providers can list if they are going to have an open house for individuals thinking about choosing them as a provider for summer youth work experience. These open houses can be held virtually, such as through Microsoft Teams or Zoom, or can be in person at a provider's office or in the community at a location such as a library meeting room. OOD staff can share this information with students, families, schools, and community partners as part of the informed choice conversation. Please note that providers are responsible for coordinating and running their own open houses using OOD guidance, which can be found under the resource number 4 section in the Services and Standards Guide. Also, providers are not allowed to conduct group intakes due to potentially confidential violations. Let's talk about provider summer youth flyers. Summer youth flyers, like open houses, are another tool that providers can use to help further provide information for informed choice to participants. The flyers are to be submitted to PCMU at pcmu@ood.ohio.gov for approval before distributing to OOD staff. Once approved, PCMU will make these flyers available to OOD staff. The requirements of these flyers are that the OOD logo cannot be used. It needs to be emailed to PCMU in PDF format. It needs to be carefully reviewed before emailing it to PCMU. And please do not include a statement on transportation, such as it's available or will be provided. Finally, let's talk about other service options. Students can also participate in other summer youth services such as job exploration counseling, where the provider may offer up to 3 weeks of this service billed at a weekly rate. The service allows for 10 to 15 hours per week of exploring different jobs in the community. Career technical exploration, also known as Career Tech X, may be available in your area. Non-permanent work, such as summer jobs, are also available for participants who are ready for work in the community outside the Summer Youth Work Experience program. This usually begins in late winter to early spring in order for a provider to help a student secure a job in the summer. This is authorized as Job Search Assistance Non-Permanent, as Parts 1 through 3 can be authorized as appropriate, similar to permanent jobs. Finally, students can be referred for any appropriate VR fee schedule service as outlined in the Services and Standards Guide. OOD staff can communicate locally with providers to see what is available. Now I will turn it over to Stacy Evans.
Let's talk about how completing a summer youth work experience may impact students that receive Social Security benefits, Medicaid, or other public benefits, and some resources that may benefit them. A student that participates in a summer youth work experience or obtains a part-time job during the summer may have income reporting requirements or have work incentives benefits that are available to them. VR staff or providers may want to refer the participant and or their parents to Ohio Disabilities Benefits 101. You can find this at oh.db101.org. This is where they will find some videos on work incentives and benefits that may help them better prepare. VR staff will find the OOD work incentives fact sheets in Aware as well as on OOD's website on the policies page. When considering work incentives planning or coordination services, keep in mind students may be referred to either a provider that offers these services or an internal OOD work incentives consultant. Now let's look at some additional resources for VR staff. There are additional letters VR staff will find in Aware that students and parents may find quite helpful. These letters are the Summer Youth Family Letter, SSA Student Exclusion for Summer Youth Letter, and fact sheets regarding work incentives. The Safe and Sound Preventing, Addressing, and Reporting Significant Incidents video training has also been updated for 2026. Be sure to watch and familiarize yourself with the updated information. You may also find the incident reporting and tracking policy at 10-ADM-04. The summer youth site visit forms will be available for you to use when you visit the sites and observe students working. These forms provide good information on how providers are engaging with the students and the type of experience they are delivering. The Services and Standard Guide is always a fantastic place to look for additional information, and you'll want to look at Resource 4 because this is where you will find information regarding summer youth work experience. We also have the Summer Youth Work Experience video that is new this year that showcases a few students at a couple of sites during the Summer Youth Work Experience of 2025. Now we're going to talk about Summer Youth and the Mobile Services Unit. First, we want to highlight the importance of the Mobile Services Unit's mission. It is to bring OOD services to underserved, hard-to-reach communities by delivering direct support, resources, and partnerships where they're needed most. The key function of the Mobile Services Unit is to help with providing direct services to participants, community outreach, partnerships with organizations, and mobile office space. The expected impact is faster service delivery times, great accessibility to services, stronger community ties, and more flexible mobile support. Here are some of the ways the Mobile Services Unit was used during Summer Youth 2025. Summer youth staffings were offered, which helped with timeliness to participants, parents, and the providers. We also partnered with community organization Dress for Success and offered at no cost to the summer youth work experience participants clothing for interviews and for work. Pre-S was offered directly to students locally, and on-site work incentives consultations were offered, which gave students a real-time learning opportunity since students were working and had received their first paycheck. As planning begins for summer 2026, you may have interest in working with the Mobile Service Unit. We're open to new ideas and appreciate the opportunity to collaborate and develop partnerships that expand services and reaches the greater community. The Mobile Services Unit requests a minimum of 14 days notice to best coordinate the logistics and ensure there is proper staffing for the unit to attend events. If you would like to partner with the Mobile Services Unit, please email ood.mobileservicesunit@ood.ohio.gov. Now that you have all the information to start planning your summer youth program and ensuring a wonderful experience to the students, let's discuss what is expected after the service is completed. Providers are expected to coordinate summer youth work experience staffings with the participants' team, which includes VR staff, school personnel, county board staff, case managers, parents, and anyone else that has been deemed as part of the team. The staffing should be completed by September 30th. This is an opportunity for everyone to learn and discuss the successes, challenges, and service recommendations for the future. It also gives the student the opportunity to have a voice and express themselves. Invoices should be submitted in a timely manner, generally within 21 calendar days of the last service provided. We also encourage providers to reflect and analyze the service and work sites that they offered. Some questions you might want to ask: what went well? What could be done better? Consider also reaching out to students and families for their feedback. VR staff will work with the participant and their team and determine next steps after reviewing all of the information and feedback provided. Please make sure there are releases in the case before providing information to someone that is inquiring about a participant. When it comes to decision making in the planning process, always consider informed choice, the student's voice, and including the family. If you need additional support for the summer youth work experience process, please use the information on this slide to help guide you. Providers, if you have any specific case questions, please contact the referring counselor or coordinator. If there are questions regarding billings, please contact the issuing or bill processing accountant examiner 2. General questions can be sent to aeuquestions@ood.ohio.gov. For programmatic or service questions, please reference the Services and Standards Guide, resource number 4, that is all about Summer Youth Work Experience Program. If you have remaining questions, feel free to contact the Provider and Contract Management Unit. On this last slide, you will find contact information for the Provider and Contract Management Unit. You may email the PCMU mailbox at pcmu@ood.ohio.gov, and your email will be provided to the appropriate RPS, or you may email your area RPS. In the Northeast, that would be Ronald Woods; East Central, Sarah Trout; Southeast, Stacy Evans; Southwest, Ginger Scaife; and Northwest would be Jennifer Cosgrove. The VR manager for the Provider and Contract Management Unit is Jay Burns. Thank you for your time today. We appreciate your attention during this training, and we are looking forward to the best summer yet.